£171. People are being advised to take a photograph of their meter reading amid record high energy prices. Merseyside police have charged a 34-year-old man with the murder of Olivia Pratt-Corbell. Thomas Cashman is accused of killing the 9-year-old who was shot in her home in Liverpool last month. A second man, 40-year-old Paul Russell, has been charged with assisting an offender. Cashman has also been charged with the attempted murder of Olivia's mother and convicted burglar Joseph Nee, who was chased into the property. They'll appear at Liverpool Magistrates Court on Monday.
The investigation team, with support from officers and staff from across the UK, have worked relentlessly since the murder on the 22nd of August. It has been a complex inquiry which has been supported throughout by Olivia's mum and dad and the wider Merseyside community.
King Charles won't be attending next month's COP27 climate change summit in Egypt. The Sunday Times has reported Prime Minister Liz Truss had objected to him attending during an audience at Buckingham Palace last month. However, a Downing Street source says it's ridiculous to suggest those were the orders given. It's understood that after he sought advice from the government, it was agreed this wouldn't be the right occasion for the King to make his first overseas visit as sovereign. And a family photo of the King, Prince William, the Queen Consort and the Princess of Wales has been released by Buckingham Palace. The smiling portrait was taken at the palace on September the 18th, just 10 days after the Queen's death, and before Charles and Camilla hosted a reception for world leaders on the eve of the Queen's funeral. The senior royals are wearing black as the picture was taken during the period of mourning. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's over to headliners.
Hello and welcome to Headliners, your first look at tomorrow's papers with me, Mark Dolan, and the brilliant comedians Josh Howie and Lewis Schaefer. Yeah, look, there you go. There he is, Lewis Schaefer, applauding himself.
Somebody's got to do it.
There you go. Too right. Well, let's applaud tomorrow's papers and let's take a look at the Telegraph. And they lead with the following. Truss, only my plan for growth will reverse UK's slow decline. False data fueled Whitehall's war on cars. And unleash nuclear weapons on Ukraine, Chechen ally tells Putin. OK, next up, let's go to the Independent, please, and the Ukrainians who will never give up. Kim Sengupta, the writer at The Independent, speaks to people fleeing from regions annexed by Russia, but who retain hope and defiance. Tories tell Truss, U-turn now or face rebellion. Liz Truss has a matter of days to row back on tax and welfare cuts or face a rebellion that could see her removed from Downing Street by Christmas. Conservative MPs have warned. Senior backbenchers told The Independent MPs across the party are livid at suggestions she plans to renege on a promised benefit uprating to pay for tax cuts for the rich, with one describing Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget as electoral suicide. The Observer next. Voters abandon Tories as faith in economic competence dives, and humiliation for Putin as key city is liberated by Ukrainians. The Sunday Mirror, Brit escaped Russians to tell cellmate girls, your dad loved you so much. This is a Ukraine exclusive by the Mirror. Aid worker POW keeps promise to fellow hostage who died. The Sunday Times, Truss advised King to stay away from climate summit. And new blow for Putin as Ukraine flags fly over a key hub. Kwarteng budget party with financiers who may have cashed in is the other story in the Sunday Times. The Sunday Express, Olivia, man on murder charge, breakthrough in 6-week manhunt after girl 9 was shot in her own home. And the Daily Star Sunday. Comic heroes possessed me, says impressionist playing him on stage. Les Dawson's ghost ripped my trousers. Ace impressionist John Culshaw says Les Dawson blankety pranked him from beyond the grave, ripping a hole in his trousers as he portrayed the telly legend. And those are your front pages. Let's start with the Sunday Times and an interesting look into what Kwasi Kwarteng was up to before the mini budget announcement. Josh.
Well, yeah, this is actually just on budget day. Yeah, he did, and then he went off to a cocktail party with all of his city mates, and they all kind of said to him, hey, double down, what you're doing is brilliant, whilst they all just made loads of money. That's what it seems like anyway. This was at one of the Conservative donors' house, Andrew Law, who's a donor. He went there on the Friday night. Now, there's something a little bit damning here, that it turns out a bunch of people who sort of work in the city are sort of saying that they call him the useful idiot, which I think is...
Kwarteng.
Yeah, that's a bit rude.
Well, this is a guy with a doctorate in economic history.
Yeah, he's not an idiot. He's written a book. I mean, I haven't written a book.
That would do it.
That's not the great... He's written a book. That's pretty amazing.
Can I say there were a lot of pictures in the book?
OK,
it was done in
fine.
Crayon.
It's 4 pages.
Yes.
OK, fine.
No, but that's right. He's a very, very smart guy. He got a scholarship to Eton. He's no stupid...
Yeah.
He's no useful idiot, but the allegation is that these people consider him that way.
Yeah, and the guy he went to the house to have champagne with, he's worth 750 million. He's donated 3.6 million to the Tories. But here's the thing. He's admitted taking short positions on the pound over the recent years, meaning that he's profited as the pound has declined, and it has declined considerably, even though it's gone back up a little. But that's only after the Bank of England put billions into the economy over the last week. But this person has made a lot of money in the last few years.
But that's what they do. I mean, they...
Well, that's what they do.
On currency, don't they?
Yeah.
I mean,
but if they've got an insider info into what's happening here, and the other thing that is a little bit, actually, I'd say more than a little bit damning, is that a source who attended the party said that Kwarteng seemed surprised by the reaction of the market. I think maybe he didn't see it coming. Now, that seems to go very much against some people who were suggesting that this whole thing is part of some genius master plan, and actually there's something that they're aiming for. As opposed to the fact that it seems like, it's not part of it.
They're aiming for economic growth, but I think the second half of that I would agree with, which is I think that Kwarteng misjudged how the markets would react. There's no way he was going to have that budget thinking the pound will get a hammering and that will be fine.
But some people, that's what they seem to be suggesting, was that they wanted the pound to go down because they wanted the
well, then this is the other bonkers conspiracy theory, which is that he's going to crash the currency as Chancellor in order to enrich his mates who run hedge funds. That's a little far-fetched.
Well, I'm not saying that that's necessarily what's happened, but maybe
you could say his mates in the hedge funds are encouraging him to go for this neoliberal policy. But the idea that he would torch his own career to help his rich friends, I think it's just far of the mark.
Well, also, they're the ones who are calling him a useful idiot.
Well, one person said that, and you can't...
Well, he said a bunch of people.
Well, the point is that if he wanted to do something nefarious, he would have had the party before he announced the budget and told the people at the party. But he didn't do that. This is the party that he had...
But he had dinner with his old boss, who also would is on record saying that what's happening now is the gifts that keep on giving is the bets against the UK government bonds, which also crashed.
Yeah, but then they went up 10%. They went up 10%.
No, they didn't. Yeah, but only after billions were put in, after they already shorted it. Anyway, whatever.
Well, no. Listen, I hear what you're saying, and it certainly doesn't have a good flavour to it. But Gordon Brown, he was known as the toast of the City of London. Gordon Brown famously really sort of romanced the city and made sure that taxes were at 40%.
Yeah, but he made by making them billions until, of course, the global crash. But the point is, at the time, he made billions as the economy got better, not as the economy tanked.
Right. Because he was the darling of the city, Gordon Brown, because he gave them such favourable terms in which to thrive. The City of London became the world's financial capital. And the reason why New Labour went for that is because the amazing amount of national income that was produced from that part of...
Yeah, but then they put all their eggs in one basket and then it all went doody-doody.
That's a fair point. But so with this, the idea of this budget is either a conspiracy theory in which the Chancellor is there just to enrich his hedge fund mates for when he leaves politics, or it's that they simply want to do everything they can to get economic growth so that you have national income which pays for everything.
I think it's just a massive gamble. But what's dodgy about this is how much linkage is there going on between him and the people that he used to work for, work with? How have they benefited from it?
Oh, I think you're being ridiculous. They're Tories.
Well, I am ridiculous.
They hang out with their rich friends. They know rich people. This is not... You can't call it a conspiracy.
OK, well, I've seen Wall Street, so I know what happens.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I think you're right to raise these questions. I think you have to understand and know what company our politicians keep, because it does shape their philosophy and their policies.
Yeah, and also people's bank balances, seemingly.
Correct.
No, I think these people, everyone knows they hang out with rich people.
You're right, they heard this information, but we're not going to utilise it in any way to make ourselves
How
even
do
richer.
rich people make money? They make money by selling short stocks and currency. Or they buy currency. This is how they make money, because they buy it when it goes, you know, when they think it's going to go up. This situation is not a shock.
Here's the thing, Josh. I'm not rich. I guess you're not rich.
Very much so.
Lewis is full inherited wealth.
rich.
He's blue-blooded, New York aristocracy. But why do we attack rich people? Why is this tax cut for the wealthiest so unpopular, given that it's the rich people who pay such a disproportionate amount of tax into the Treasury, who go shopping here, who pay VAT on Rolls-Royces and Ferraris, and who invest in this country? Rich people...
That's if they pay tax.
I'm not happy if we...
Yeah.
Well, that's a big if, and that's another question. But, I mean... The bottom line is, I don't know why we don't love bomb the rich, because they pay for the NHS and policing and schools.
Well, they pay for some of it, and the question, as you say...
No, they pay for
But what's
all of
that
it.
figure? I think it's 1% pay
Yeah.
30% of all income tax.
Yeah, and when those
So I
people
like those people. Let's have more of them, is what I'm thinking. Even if I'm not one of them.
Yeah, but in this particular case, if you have people who are making a lot of money and they're betting against, you know, the rest of our currency going down or the borrowing costs for the government going up, that is going to affect all of us.
Yes, and also we can have this academic argument about economic growth, but if interest rates hit 7 or 8%, we're all screwed.
Well, the people particularly who have little money.
Yeah, very fair point. Very fair point. And we saw that, of course, 10 years ago, 12 years ago during the credit crunch. Sunday's independent, and the Tories want to cut back benefits in Britain, Lewis.
I mean, quelle surprise, or quelle surprise, whatever the posh English people say it as.
I think that's French, isn't it? Surprise.
Yeah, well, if posh people speak French, I assume that they do. Anyway, this is the independent, and the government, and so some guy who's a cabinet ally of Liz Truss says...
Are there any of those?
I don't know. I think it's in the Independent, and it says that the Tories want to the state's extremely large, and the Tories want to have a low tax economy, and so there's going to be major austerity cuts ahead. And I think that's totally first of all, it's predictable, because when you spend all the money from the magic money tree and there's no more money left, you're going to have austerity. Okay, and number two, that is in theory what conservatives are all about, which is having a low tax economy with kind of a. So I don't know how this is news. This is the
thing. I mean, the top rate of income tax in America is 37%, isn't it? The state is significantly smaller than it is here, and I just worry that
I don't think it's that much smaller.
Is it not much smaller? Big state, high tax is a race to the bottom, isn't it?
I would agree with you. I mean, and I know Leo Kearse would agree with you if he were here, but he's giving birth to a baby.
He's siring a baby.
He's siring a baby. He's trying to win.
He's actually got blood, urine, and other stuff on his hands as we speak.
Yeah,
baby's nowhere to be seen.
And I'm just telling you,
should really not be sending you photos.
If you were a man if you were a man and your wife is giving birth, don't think that that's going to endear you to her.
Okay,
absolutely right. Well said, by the way.
It didn't endear.
Keep on the story, mate. Keep on the story.
Okay, so the story is basically the story is that, as you said before, this country, Britain, is based on rich people living here and spending money. Half of the population don't pay any taxes, at least, or even more than that, in London. So who's paying the taxes of those people, including Louis Schaefer? Who's paying those people's taxes? Is the rich people. So I think what Kwasi is doing is, I think, brilliant, because he is setting up the future. Yes, I'm not even kidding. He's setting up the future when London will return to a place where the richest people want to live and pay taxes. But also, I think he knows that the Conservative Party is dead in the water. They have no chance of winning the next election, and he's laying basically a stake in the sand. I don't know. That's the analogy, and saying, hey, the next time they pick a leader after Starmer, let them pick me, because I really believe in this stuff. Does that make
Line
sense
in the sand?
A line in the sand, no. Something like maybe a flag on the
Planting
mountain.
his flag?
Planting his flag on the top of the mountain and saying, this is what I believe in. I believe in having rich people come
Well,
to this country.
good for them having a belief in that, and then the poor people are going to suffer. We've had 12 years of austerity already, so now they're saying they want more cuts. This person here, Simon Clark, saying that Britons live in a fool's paradise. Who are the fools? The people who think that they can cut further and win the next election.
You say austerity, I mean, I think in certain areas...
And give a tax rise to the richest.
I deeply
cuts to the richest.
regretted the loss of Shaw Start centres in the course of the pandemic, not the pandemic, the credit crunch. But what about the NHS? I mean, how much more money have we got to give the NHS?
Look, I'm not going to say that there aren't things that need to be trimmed, but the fact is that they have spent 12 years cutting. People have already suffered because of it. There are people out there
I don't think
who have.
that's true.
Well, congratulations, Mister, because you haven't suffered.
No,
there are people. How about the increase of food banks?
Yeah.
People are out there, and we haven't even got to the winter yet. We haven't got to what's going to be going on with mortgages coming up.
Giving away free cheese when people line up for free cheese doesn't mean that people.
You just bring it back to cheese every time.
I'm saying this is that what am I saying?
I'm lactose intolerant. So cheese thing doesn't work for me. You could offer me something else?
Yeah, but when you set up a food bank and you say give away free food, of course they're going to be queues around the block, whether people have money or not. Of course they're going to. The point is, and I can talk about poverty because I am the poorest Jew in the world.
Oh
anyway,
my God!
Even though I look amazing, But what has happened is they spent all the money, and because they spent all the money and spent money they didn't have, the currency is totally debased.
Bingo.
Totally debased.
Well, look, if they want to talk about cutting costs, maybe they could get some of that money back, the billions that they spent on PPE that's wasted.
I think that's a fair point. And I will take your point about years of austerity, but I'll retort with the pandemic. And
that's made a situation worse, for sure. Two wrongs don't make a right here.
Yeah.
But the fact is, to be talking about... to be giving tax cuts to the richest and further cutting the welfare state for the people who are the poorest, who have the least.
It's not a good look.
It's more than a good look. It's not just that it's a good look. People are suffering.
It isn't a good look, and that's what I think shocks people everywhere. It doesn't look good, but it's brilliant.
Oh, my God. OK,
and on
good
that
luck.
note,
OK.
Well, if it boosts the economy and we've got big GDP next year, then it is brilliant.
It's not going to help the GDP next year.
Oh dear. We'll get. In what way is it brilliant? Then let's find out. Let's bring Lewis and Josh back in a year's time and have a look at the economy. Meanwhile, can we do 3 in 3? Let's see if we can pull this one off. The Sunday Times and King Charles has been told to keep his nose out of the upcoming climate summit. Josh.
Yes, so he was going to attend COP27 in Egypt, and
he loves COP.
He loves COP. We all love COP. Well, but the point is, and cheese, especially COP cheese. But what? But Liz Truss has basically said, "Please stay away," or maybe she didn't even say please. Who knows? They had a little meeting, and now he's not going to go. Obviously, the environment is one of his big interests and concerns. They're saying the palace saying that there are still ways he might be able to. Help out, something called Zoom or Cameo, maybe shoot a cameo video.
The Queen back in the day, she wouldn't have been there, and so...
I know that's not true. She was there. She gave a talk even at the last year one, yeah. So, but this is the bit that's a little bit more interesting here, is that a source said the Queen gave an entirely non-political address at COP last year. So they're saying it's an error in judgment on the part of the government. Now, that source... Is that someone from the King's camp, briefing against the government? That's not a good look in a couple of weeks in terms of their relationship.
How can you give a totally non-political speech at a political event like COP, whatever it is? What's the number?
COP26.
Yeah. COP26. How can you? Climate change is a political issue.
COP24 was the best, I thought, in terms of the sequels.
I think they made too many. I actually checked out after COP3.
Yeah.
Which starts Sylvester Stallone and Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, and then they're all downhill from then.
I'll say this. Prince Charles wants to be king, and they don't want him to be there because
Have you not had the news?
That he is, but he's not. No, he wants to be a king.
A lot of coverage on GB.
I'm going to tell you something.
He's been on holiday.
He doesn't want to be a king like his mother. Like his mother was a queen. He wants to be a king like King Charles I. He wants to be.
He wants to run the country.
He wants to run the country, and he hasn't. He needs to be told. In this country, the king does not run the country.
Long live the king. Lewis Schaefer king for king. I think so. Let's have a look at the Sunday Mirror now, and a publicity stunt that in no way will backfire on the cause of those behind it. Lewis.
Well, this is just a shocking story. It's in the Mirror, and not that you can believe anything that's in the Mirror. Not that you can believe anything that's in any of these newspapers.
Tell the story.
The story is that a woman pours human waste over Captain Tom's memorial in shocking, dirty protest. Yeah. Captain Tom was that super old guy who wanted to help the NHS. He raised like £39 million for the NHS, which basically cured COVID. He did it all himself, and the NHS did an amazing job. Anyway, and so this woman, sometimes a political action is just the action of a crazy person. Here's a woman who decides to protest the use of private jets, part of the the climate change thing, and pours a bucket of disgusting stuff on the memorial to Captain Sir Tom Moore in Derbyshire.
Absolutely ridiculous.
Unless viewers are offended, and if you are offended, then look away from the camera now. But this is...
I don't think you should play it.
You don't think so? No?
Can you imagine it?
No, I think because...
You know what? Let's not give them the publicity.
I agree with that.
Yeah. No,
let's talk about it for one more minute.
I don't mean to tell you how to do your show.
No, I don't think we should run it. I think you're right, because it's a terrible insult to the memory of Tom Moore.
It's a crazy... You agree with me, Mark?
100%. I'm with you all the way.
I do too, by the way. I agree with you guys.
Unanimity on the panel. Look, we've got a break approaching, but let's have a look at the Mail on Sunday, reporting on mega protests that have been happening all over the country, Josh.
Yes, so for those eco-warriors who aren't pouring bodily products onto people who've done good. Yeah. London today and actually across the UK, there have been a lot of protests. It hasn't just been eco-warriors marching through central London. It's been lots of different protests, but there's like Just Stop Oil. There's also been Jeremy Corbyn, my favourite guy. He's been going through King's Cross or something to support the railway strikes. His brother, who's a conspiracy theorist, has actually been sort of doing counter-protests because he thinks global warming is a myth. And so it's been fun in the city centre today. Everybody's been going out doing their stuff. Also including something I do definitely agree with, people in support of Mahsa Amini, who was the young girl who was murdered by the Iranians. I hope, of course, that doesn't end in any violence, certainly towards our police. But I'm glad that people are out there finally protesting and showing their support for the Iranian people at this time.
Absolutely right. Lots more stories to come. How the Kremlin is bribing people into fighting in Ukraine. How new obesity rules are confusing shoppers. And how exam cheating has spiked with remote exams. See you in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know. The latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headliners. Your first look at tomorrow's papers. Helping me do just that are the brilliant comedians Josh Howie and Lewis Schaefer.
This is handsome. This is by these adult nappies. Look.
Yeah.
I don't think we should have too many camera still shots on Lewis. I think it feeds the monster.
I was told I had a hair on my thing.
What happens is he gurns, he builds his part. It's all about him. It's Lewis Schaefer with Mark Dolan and Josh Howie, isn't it? Let's be honest.
That's the show.
Fair enough. Well, look, Lewis, thanks for having us. Let's get on to the Mail on Sunday. And for those Russians who are feeling sheepish about joining the war in Ukraine, the Kremlin has something to bribe them with, Joshua.
Indeed, lambs to the slaughter. Families of Russian men are being called up to fight Putin's Ukraine war, are being bribed with a sheep each. Everyone gets a sheep. So
it's a hefty price.
It's a hefty price.
I could probably get you to do a lot of things for a sheep, couldn't I?
I'm not worth a sheep. I think my wife would be very happy if she got a sheep instead of me. It's wool to keep her warm. Anyway, and because now they're they're seeking a lot of their conscripts outside of Moscow. Because, of course, the closer they do it to Moscow, that's where the money is, that's where the wealth is. And once they start conscripting from the elites, or even people who know about each other, that's when their protests will start.
The middle classes.
Yeah, the middle classes and whatever. Doing it out, I mean, Russia's such a huge, humongous country, so they've been able to sort of go into these places and these outreach. So that's why they want a sheep or bags of flour and cabbage and potatoes and whatnot, because they're hoping that those protests won't spread to Moscow. But the protests are happening. Women are protesting. There's a horrible video online of like these police officers attacking this mum of a newborn baby and like holding the pram, and 27 women were detained. So it's getting out there, and people are protesting what's going on. And as a side thing, Russian men are seemingly feel like they may be about to die because there's a lot of men trying to donate their sperm or to get a sample just in case they die. That's then they can sort of live on.
Such a sad, devastating insight into how people are having to think now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do it anyway, but it's got nothing to do with going to war.
And a lot of people don't know this, but you've been very generous with your DNA for a lot of years now.
Say hi to the kids, will you?
I will do. All three of them. They've all got learning difficulties, but hey, what can you do? It's the chance you take. Sticking with the Mail, and this one is about romance gone wrong with some tragic consequences. Lewis.
Well, it's the Daily Mail, and they always make things interesting. But a sobbing refugee, this was basically kicked out by her British lover, and who was actually with somebody at the same time because he was one of the refugees. It's war, and Britain wants to present themselves as being great people and say,
excuse me, maybe we are actually great people.
Some people are great people, but a lot of times it's what do they call that? Where it's virtue signaling.
No.
Where it's like, look, we're
great people.
Yeah,
we're great people.
We're letting. But it's also a combination of what happens when you let women too close.
Tell me more.
Can we just say what the story is here?
She's a young woman, 22 years old, from the Ukraine.
She's very beautiful.
Escaping the war.
Probably very beautiful. They're all thin and beautiful. I know you're obsessed with weight and things like that, but they're all beautiful.
They are. The Ukrainian women are very beautiful.
They're all beautiful. That's what
You've got about 4 in your home, don't you?
Yeah. I mean,
from before the war, right?
In fairness, I took them in the mid-90s when Ukraine was peaceful, but just in case, really.
Yeah. Just in case.
Stockpiling.
And you're hoping that a war breaks out in the Philippines or Thailand.
Yeah. I'm the only one that needs this war to continue, just to maintain my social life. But in all seriousness, what exactly happened? Just lay it down.
This guy,
he's married.
He's married. He lives in Bradford.
They got together within 10 days. Now he moved out.
So this woman, beautiful Ukrainian, moves in.
Yeah. Then
within 10 days, he's
out. Yeah. And then they've moved out. now they've broken up because supposedly she was getting drunk and after an incident where she stabbed the kitchen wall. We've all been there.
Yeah.
And now she's been
I like that in a woman.
Yeah, well, send her your way, because this is fantastic. She said that she's been offered a place in London. A millionaire has contacted her through social media, offered her a place to live and told her that there's a gym that she could use. He just has to finish his champagne party first. But it looks like she might be going back to Ukraine. Her mum says, come back. But this guy, Tony, is hilarious. He says, I hope we can be friends when all the hysteria has died down, like after he sends her back to a war
Good luck
zone.
with that.
It's terrible. And also, he says, and this is also very funny, is he says, I'm pretty skint. I haven't been able to get work because I've got a public profile and doing security work is now more difficult. It's like, mate, you're not in the Secret Service. This isn't sort of at the end of Line of Fire.
But you know what? For Bradford,
going to go undercover.
For Bradford, that's a big deal. He's been on TV. It's like, look at me. Ever since I've been on this show, the world has picked up.
He said people who work in security have to keep their heads down. Yeah, looking at trainers, mate.
Yeah. I just think what this is at the end of the day has nothing to do with the Ukraine war. It's what happens when you let a pretty girl into your home.
It's asking for trouble, isn't it?
It's asking for trouble. I said that to the mother of my children. I said, no.
Is that what you made her? No pretty women.
Well, she was pretty, and she wanted to have an au pair come and move into our house. And I said, no, I don't want an au pair in my house. Not because I'm that kind of guy, which I am not, well, maybe, but because you can't trust. Men are dogs.
Okay, and your wife left you anyway. Wonderful. End of story.
Should have got the au pair.
Yeah.
I can hook you up with the Ukrainian if you like. She's a bit of a wall stabber, but otherwise she's a good person. The Sunday Times has a shocking story on what online chat rooms are doing to children, Josh.
Well, it's not just online chat rooms. It's an online chat room that's been pushed by trans charity Mermaids that's now being under investigation by the by the Charity Commission. They've been looking into more and more. By the way, I should say Mermaids, which the charity set up to offer support to trans youth and has had a lot of support from people like Emma Watson and Prince Harry. There's been doing some pretty dodgy stuff here. This mum tells the case of this 14-year-old son who she finds a picture of a Willie on their phone, and it was all kind of... It's a little bit misleading at the beginning of the article, to be fair, but then she finds, by looking on his phone, all this stuff from Mermaids charity. Now, what's happening in Mermaids, like a lot of children's have these like online forums, but it seems like they haven't been monitoring them correctly. Someone like Childline does it very well, and they've got very strict rules, and they have people who monitor people's posts before they go up, and they're meant to be these sort of safe spaces. It doesn't seem like Mermaids is doing that, because when they were going on Mermaids, people were then suggesting, hey, let's go on to Discord, which is a much more sort of dodgy site where they can talk about all crazy things, give their personal details. Lots of grooming of young children goes on Discord. So the fact that Mermaids was letting this all kind of happen and people going off the site to this Discord place is obviously a massive red flag.
Yeah.
And this has been an investigation by the Times.
You're saying it's getting dodgy. It starts off with an inherent dodgy position. Which is this whole thing of convincing.
Oh
children.
no, of course. I mean, and they've been putting out breast binders to young teenagers. I mean, there's lots of other stuff. The point is, the stuff keeps on piling up, and of course, this is what they say in response. They go, "Oh, that they are victim of a smear campaign," and you always see people say that, except for the fact, when there are actual real accusations. These are things they have done. Yeah. So it's not like there's a smear campaign. Stop doing that stuff.
It doesn't help their cause that the Tavistock Centre has closed down.
Well, it's closing down, I think, next year or whatever. It's because of this CAS report that came out, and the Tavistock and the Mermaids charity work very closely together, and they just haven't had the science to back up this position of just pushing young children or young teens into this life of medication and whatever, as opposed to when the fact that most of them will probably grow out of it.
Because what happens is that quite often these kids, they're depressed, they're not happy with their lives, and they get misdiagnosed as having gender dysphoria. In other words, they say, look, you're depressed because you're a boy in a girl's body. Yeah. And then that's the diagnosis. And then sometimes they get puberty blockers, which stops puberty from happening.
And Mermaids basically says, no, there's no side effects. Turns out there are loads of side effects.
Yeah. How could they know that there will be no side effects to stopping beauty?
Well, exactly, and certainly when they haven't got the research to back it up.
Yeah.
So they've just been pushing an ideology, essentially. And now, but in an unsafe way, beyond the fact that the ideology is unsafe, things like this, which have real ramifications, where they're sort of allowing these children to go onto even these terrible websites and not monitoring their online stuff properly, is just indicative of, I think, the bigger picture here, where they're set up to supposedly to help children, but actually children are being damaged.
And no one wants to speak out against this damage to kids because they're afraid of being called transphobic. It's like the grooming gang, the situation in parts of the country where you can't call it out because of...
Well, they're being called out now. They are being exposed. Of course, by saying that stuff, yes, they're going to go, oh, it's a smear campaign, and everybody who supports this stuff is going, oh, my God, Turf Island and the UK is worse. No, we're calling this stuff out. We are protecting our youth.
You're focusing on the end bit, which is this perception that there might be some grooming going on. But the initial thing is just so evil, the idea of this thing called phalloplasty. They're talking about forearm or thigh skin grafts, phalloplasty.
Well, if you look at the damage it does to an arm, this is where they take part of the forearm and make it into an artificial willy. But you see the damage that it does to the arm.
So they take the flesh off the arm and they put it downstairs?
Yeah.
That's progress, is it?
Isn't this supposed to be a comedy program, Mark?
Lewis, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How do you identify? What are your pronouns, baby?
I have postnouns, which is plus. Lewis Schaefer plus.
Mine are Jewish.
That would do it.
Yeah.
2 in 2, can it be done? I know it can. Let's go to the Times. And new rules to control the way we shop and making it harder to find the groceries we want. Lewis, what's going on?
Well, I didn't even hear about this, but the government is instituting changes, regulations on the way supermarkets display products to sort of hide products with fat and sugar and salt in places where they can't be seen as easily by the people going into the supermarket, so people don't buy as much of it because it's to make healthy choices.
Yeah.
And so it's the government of this country, which should be a libertarian or at least a hands-off government.
Correct.
Going into telling...
Yeah, but I thought you'd be for this.
I am in favor of people eating properly. Well, but I don't believe the government should get involved in making people...
Well, look, it's just pushing products to a different part
and
of the supermarket.
I don't think you should trick people into eating properly.
Here we go. What about you could argue that the supermarkets are tricking people by placing these sort of high-fat, sugared products right near the end in terms of, they've got their kids, they're queuing up by the till.
Impulse buy.
Even I don't believe that. Even I don't.
Well, it's a proven phenomenon. That's why they do it.
That's what... It's hyper-capitalism.
No, it's a provable phenomenon that where they place that product, that makes a difference.
But they're not trying to push sugar.
Of course they are.
No, they're not. Sugar happens to be in it. That's the tool to get people to buy it. But they don't care.
Right, they're trying to push as much stuff as they can.
Yeah, whatever people buy, whether it's salt or sugar or whatever. I mean, this is the thing. Obesity is not the number one problem in this country, Mark Dolan.
It's Lewis Schaefer.
It isn't the number one problem. It is a symptom of the number one problem, which is overeating super palatable foods. The problem is the foods are super palatable, and tricking people into not eating super palatable foods is not...
Well, it's going to help. By the way, this legislation hasn't gone through, and it may not go through. And the supermarkets themselves are a little bit upset because they've spent a lot of money sorting this stuff out now, and for the government to turn around and go, actually, maybe we're not going to do this because it was a kind of a Borisy legislation that he was trying to get through.
I'm against that, Josh.
Well, I'm very shocked to hear that.
I'm
That's the most offensive thing you've said
Mark
today.
Dolan is the number one person on British TV fighting for good health and for good food.
Well, God help all of us then. We're all doomed. The Sunday Telegraph, finally, before the break. And who would have guessed that doing exams remotely with no invigilators would have consequences, Josh?
Yes, so remote exams fuel a surge in cheating as rogue students pay for the answers. Now, this isn't a new phenomenon. This person I shared a flat with at university 25 years ago paid for his essays to get written. I lived alone. And no, so this is definitely not a new phenomenon. But this whole idea of doing exams online, like over Zoom, is. So a few interesting cases have come up, and this is a law firm that's been set up that has a department to defend people. They're seeing a 60% increase in students. Now, one of the things that seems particularly unfair is that a student went onto this website called Chegg you upload an exam question, see what the answers people might have given before, but this person used their university email address. So I think they should just fail university for stupidity right there. Although, to be fair, they didn't actually use the answer. But then another case here, there were 2 answers went in from the same IP address. And they're saying, look, this is just 2 people who live in the same flat together, but now they're having to sort of prove that they weren't working together whilst the exam was going on. I think that's a little bit unfair. And then this is terrible. Supposedly these students were doing an online exam, and they were also on WhatsApp, all comparing notes with each other. And someone on the WhatsApp group dobbed them in.
Disgraceful.
Stitches, snitches, get stitches.
Absolute disgrace. There's no loyalty except here in the studio. We've saved our best till last, folks. Coming up, why robots are still not ready to take over the world, why giving the middle finger is good for you, and why using Latin isn't a good way to name things. See you shortly.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Mark Dolan, and this is Headline as your first look at tomorrow's papers. Tonight in the company of Josh Howie and Lewis Schaefer-Plus.
Yes.
The Mail on Sunday now, and cannabis could be as harmful as cocaine, according to police chiefs. Tell us about this, Lewis.
Well, this is a group of Tory police and crime commissioners, PCCs, okay, writing in the Daily Mail, or being reported in the Daily Mail, that cannabis is just as harmful as cocaine and crack and should be classified as a Class A drug. And this guy, David Sidgwick, he's the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner.
Such a square, David.
Well, he's not square. The guy is round. He's talking about health. First of all, what does the police commissioner know about health? Does he have a public health degree? Is he using any public information about public health? Why is he digging into this? There's only one answer. The only answer is that he's the police and he doesn't want to actually solve any crime. So he wants some new crime that he can go after, which is we're so far beyond the legalization of cannabis. We are so the illegal, making it more whatever it is. It should be totally legal. And when you see this guy, this David Sidgwick, he is completely fat, completely bloated. He
He has the munchies.
He smells of type 2 diabetes. I'm pretty sure he's got gout. At least, if not not a flare-up of gout, maybe he's got hyperuricemia, which is...
Anyway, but the thing is, the actual use of marijuana is going down anyway, certainly amongst the youth.
Yeah.
Now, there is evidence, and the strongest part, the skunk, essentially, does have serious ramifications in terms of psychosis, inducing psychosis and stuff. So maybe banning that part of it, the stronger stuff. But also, I like how cannabis...
No, why is that always your answer?
Because that's what it says in the article.
But it says it in the article, but why? That's not what you should be saying.
You need to... If anybody needs cannabis, it's you right now.
You know what? For some reason, the reason I'm in favour of cannabis because it doesn't work on me.
OK.
But
Josh, this is headline is, can you stop stating facts, please?
Sorry. Can I just say something? The Daily Mail here...
What were you going to say?
I was going to say this. I was going to say this. Is that I forgot what he was saying, but it's wrong.
It's because memory loss. Cannabis induces memory loss. Cannabis here, this is what the Daily Mail said.
It is dangerous, what I want to say. Can I interrupt?
Yeah,
I want to say, it isn't good for you, cannabis. Probably it is not good for you. But to make something illegal and things aren't good for you, you know, let's make a plant-based diet illegal because it's bad for you.
Well, can I say two things? Number one is the Daily Mail here says that cannabis, also known as marijuana, weed, pot, dope, or grass, which I think is very sweet of them. It's like they're pretending that Daily Mail readers aren't massive spliff heads.
Correct.
Which we know that they are. Hey, guys, just so you know, kids.
You don't even have to be a massive spliff.
Here's my thing. I've never taken any illegal drugs. That's a genuine truth. But if they do make it illegal, they should ban alcohol. That's what I think.
Yeah, because it would be hypocrisy not to.
Absolutely. That's an incredibly damaging drug.
Mark, can you stop him? He's always I've got 5 kids. Look what a great guy it is. I'm still married. I love my wife. Lewis doesn't. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not saying that. I'm not making a moral decision. I think that cocaine and
you're
crack...
just telling the audience that they should listen to you because you're a great guy.
No, I'm not saying that. They might think, what an idiot. Why does he smoke weed? It's brilliant.
I'm not saying that, but you don't have to try to get brownie points.
There is one point about marijuana, though, Lewis, which is the smell. And I think that if we continue to normalise its use, we've got to have that awful, pungent smell when you're sitting in a cafe or walking down the street.
Only because you associate it when it's illegal, so you get your hackles up. Okay. I think it smells worse than...
So you're a libertarian. Anything goes.
Pretty much. You have to, yeah, pretty much.
It reminds me of my grandmother.
And that's enough for me. You had me at grandmother. The Observer now, speaking of cannabis, a city known for its weed is considering a ban on the very thing that gets people raving, John.
Yeah, Amsterdam is considering banning cannabis tourists from its coffee shops. Not, interestingly, banning cannabis, but just for tourists. You'd need so only for local people, essentially, which is a bit like a League of Gentlemen. This weed is just for us. Amsterdam has a problem with tourists. They have too many, arguably, and
it's a really small town.
It's a very small city, and also the tourists they have, some of them, stag do's and whatnot. It's a very popular destination, and they're somewhat disruptive. And you've got the red light district and whatnot. So this is a plan by the mayor. It's probably not going to go through, but it is an interesting article. This is in The Guardian about the pros and cons of legalising marijuana or not, because of course once if you make it illegal, the argument then is it moves elsewhere where it's more unregulated. But even though it's legal, because it's actually illegal to grow it, it's still coming from illegal sources. Yeah. So there's a lot of different pros and cons here. Amsterdam is a very beautiful city. I'm sure you've been
there. Lovely.
Yeah, exactly.
And I've been to those bars, whatever it is.
Those, the happiest days of your life.
The fact is, if you're gonna say, we can't let people smoke pot, we can't let tourists smoke pot because it's associated with. Well, you could say, we can't let them come and drink Amstel or whatever Heineken, whatever they drink in that town.
Well, I think they should make cheese. More cheese shops are needed.
Maybe they should fill in the canals because people sometimes fall into the canals. Maybe they should not have
smoking weed.
Maybe they should pave over the paving stones with nice smooth concrete.
Actually, they should stop those bicycles. They're a danger.
And the bicycles too go all the way.
Yeah, that's your real hazard.
Turn it into London.
Let's talk about a story in the Mail on Sunday and football fans during the World Cup, Lewis. Back to another drug, which is alcohol.
Yeah, which causes more problem in the world than anything. And not only does it cause problems with people doing horrible things, but it raises your uric acid level, which is a killer, which is like diabetes, raised uric acid levels.
Well, alcohol does that, doesn't it?
Alcohol does, beer especially.
Is that what it is? I've got a terrible hangover today.
Yeah,
Okay.
beer does that. It raises this uric acid thing. I'm just learning about this, and you should all pay attention to uric acid.
I don't remember anything in the article about uric acid. Interestingly, do you want to say what's happening?
You know what?
Here?
You're here most of the time. You carry the show most of the time. But what happened is in Qatar they're having the World Cup. Why they had it in Qatar?
Bribery.
Exactly.
There we go.
It was bribery.
Corruption.
Why are they having it in the middle of wintertime? Because they didn't think it out, because it's 40 degrees in the middle of
In a
summer.
boiling hot desert country.
Are people going to get drunk and disorderly? Probably not as much, because it's a dry, they don't drink there. So so they're going to have these tents that the government of Qatar is setting up. It's in the Daily Mail. They're going to set up these tents for people to recover from the effects of booze.
Well,
okay? And basically, it's not something they say, hey, you've been drinking a little bit, would you like to come into the tent? No. They're going to force people to come, because people like you, Josh, are always telling everybody what to do. Maybe we should make it illegal to do. It's disaster. Mark and I are on the same team.
Fine. There are 2.5 million people who are going to be going to Qatar for, and it's only in 50 days' time, I believe, for the football there. A lot of them will be drinking.
2.5 million?
2.5 million people are expected to go during that time. Now, I've been to Qatar, I've done gigs out there. I actually had a good time, but it is somewhat of a police state. Like, you mess around, you're in trouble. Now, there was news earlier this week of a British man who was out there who committed suicide after being arrested and then he said he was tortured. And he worked for the Qataris in terms of their tourism. So if they're doing that to someone who works for them, imagine what's going to happen. So they're going to have a big culture shock there, because they don't mess around, the police there. They are used to have being incredibly heavy-handed, including things like, it doesn't get more heavy-handed than being tortured. And so they're going to have suddenly millions of people there drunk.
And the reason they're doing this, the Qataris are doing this, is because they don't want to tell the world, we've arrested 40,000 people and put them in prison or jail. So they say, oh, we sent them to a sobering tent, which sounds very sober.
It does, and very sobering thought indeed. How about Elon Musk and masks, Josh?
Yes, so Elon Musk has created a robot, overly optimistic is the headline here, because he's calling the robot Optimus. I'm guessing because he's a bit of a Transformers geek. I can respect that. Fair enough. He's been kind of promoting this for about a year now, saying that this is big things coming, and then it was revealed on stage with all these lights, and this robot kind of came out and walked. And a bunch of people who are actually robotic scientists and AI experts were like, yeah, what's that? Like, what? So what?
Yeah.
They were not very impressed by what he's got. He's saying that they could be made for about £20,000, which is Lewis's day rate. And also, this is what they're going to make the bot. They're going to make sure it's friendly to humans. Well, thank you, Elon, for that particular thing. And he also said that one day, hopefully, that people will be buying it for, like, their parents.
Okay.
It's like, would you spend 20 grand on your parents? Only if they would, like, you thought you might get it soon because you would inherit it.
What Elon Musk is doing is very sophisticated. On one hand, he's telling the world that there's going to be a human being shortage. And then he's promoting this as a way to make money off of this so-called human being shortage. And that's all it is.
Will the robots have more personality and charisma than Elon Musk?
They'll be thinner.
They'll definitely be thinner. Can we talk about Latin, Lewis?
Well, I actually know Latin because I myself spent 3 years in Latin. Yeah,
the famous country of Latin.
Oh, yeah.
It was called in Latin class.
How do you find the locals?
No, I actually said that right. It came back when I was a kid, because I took Latin, and you're in Latin. It's like you're in Latin class. What are you doing? You're in Latin. I know, it sounds a bit odd. Anyway,
good save, Lewis.
So this is in the Telegraph, the posh Telegraph, and it says that they're having trouble. They're having trouble naming new species. There were too many new species.
Bacteria and whatnot. Too many COVID variants.
COVID-19. They've got these electron microscopes and the supercomputers, so they're finding everywhere. They've got 50,000 unnamed.
Just on this table.
Sorry, 50,000 unnamed viruses and bacteria, not even viruses, bacteria. And so what they're using made-up Latin, like that lorem ipsum fake Latin words.
Dupicella tifacacea or whatever.
Yeah.
Careful, Josh,
Hopelia
it's a family show.
corrosa. It's just all made up stuff.
Well, can we finish, gentlemen, on the middle finger? Lewis.
Well, this is an interesting story, which is not that interesting because it's in the Sun. Anyway, they did a test.
Medium, not the message, mate.
They did a test by this the University of Michigan, Kalamazoo University in Michigan, which actually is a place, Kalamazoo. Those places in Michigan have fantastic names. And they said that if you're under a lot of pain and you stick your finger out, your middle finger.
They call it here one-fingered salute. I've never heard it called that before.
That's an American way of doing it.
All right.
It'll take your mind off the fact that you're in a bad way.
So do you think right now that Leo's wife might be swearing at him and...
Yeah. But there are lots of other things. I guarantee you, if you're in pain, in this case, sticking your foot in or your hand in ice water, I'm pretty sure if while you were doing that, you were tapping yourself on the head, it would kind of divert the fact that your hand is freezing just by doing something
It's
silly.
a good point. It's a distraction technique. Well, no middle finger for Lewis and Josh.
I've done an incredible job tonight.
You've nailed it.
Yeah.
Lewis Schaefer Plus. You heard it here first.
On Twitter.
Reward yourself with a spliff.
Brilliant stuff. We're back tomorrow at 11 with more headliners. Headliners, of course, 7 days a week. And I'm back tomorrow at 9 for Mark Dolan tonight. Tory Party Conference special. See you then.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate, and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for big guests, big opinions, and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel. Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good evening. I know you were expecting to see someone else here presenting this evening, but due to circumstances beyond our control and his control, Neil Oliver could not make it tonight. I think he's stuck in Stirling or somewhere in Scotland at least. So welcome along to Neil Oliver Live tonight with me, Emily Carver, and Neil Oliver as well. Good evening, Neil. I hear you had quite a day yesterday.
Oh, Emily, the day I had yesterday, I left home about 2 o'clock as usual to travel down by train to London for tonight's show. And just a catalogue of errors and cancellations. I was more, 5-6 hours in Edinburgh Waverley railway station, cancelled trains one after another, no possibility of booking flights, all the planes were sold out. It was just one of those days. And eventually I had to just accept defeat and come back home, and here I am, ready to talk to you and all the guests from my home in Stirling. Yes.
Well, it's nice that we have the technology for you to be able to zoom in. We're going to have a bit of a hybrid this evening. We're going to have, of course, Neil's fabulous weekly monologue, which people await on tenterhooks, so we'll be having that. And we have a very busy show indeed tonight. We're going to be discussing all sorts, the economy, vaccines, cost of living, and so on and so forth. We have a very busy show. So, as you may have noticed, the government's plans for the economy have sparked turmoil. Neil is about to give us his take, and then we'll discuss with our top-class panel. PayPal continue to be criticised for closing down accounts. We'll hear about how a parents group which tried to keep schools open during the pandemic was affected. And our Great Britain tonight is 11-year-old Harriet Bagshaw, who is making an amazing gesture by donating her hair to the Little Princess Trust charity. All of that and more coming up. But first, let's get an update on the latest news from Tatiana Sanchez.
Thank you, Emily. This is the latest from the GB newsroom. Rail travellers have experienced widespread disruption across large parts of the UK today as train drivers stage a 24-hour strike in a dispute over pay, jobs and conditions. Members of the ASLEF, RMT and TSSA unions have walked out, leaving only 11% of trains running. Network Rail has urged people to only travel if necessary. The strikes are set to cause major disruption to thousands of people planning to take part in the London Marathon tomorrow. RMT Union Secretary-General Mick Lynch says they will strike until they reach an agreement.
There will be more action like this because people in Britain are being made deliberately poorer by this government every day of the week, and we've got to rebalance that. This is part of that campaign. We're going to get a deal for our members through negotiation, but supported by strike action. So it is working. It's costing the government £30 million every time we go on strike, and they're subsidising these companies to keep this going. If they change their position, we can get a negotiated settlement, and that will be a win for every worker in this country.
Householders are being advised to take a photograph of their meter readings today as energy prices rise to record levels. Regulator Ofgem says it could help to avoid being overcharged. The new price cap is now in place, with a typical household expected to spend around £2,500 a year. That's up from £1,971. The figure was expected to be £1,000 higher without the government's energy bill relief scheme. Energy consultant Catherine Porter told us ultimately the public will still pay.
In the short term, the government's going to pay for that by borrowing more money, but eventually that's going to have to be recovered through taxation. As we move through the next few years and after the end of this support scheme, prices will have come down. I don't think there's anybody who believes that prices won't be declining at that point. And I'm sure the government will reassess the situation when this 2-year scheme expires to see if more support is needed.
The Chancellor has defended his mini-budget, saying the government had to do something different to spark the economy. Writing in the Daily Telegraph, Kwasi Kwarteng insisted he'll produce a credible plan to get public finances back on track by tightly controlling public spending. The comments come after the Prime Minister admitted the government's strategy has caused disruption and warned the country faces a difficult winter. Protests have been taking place across the UK today as people rally against rising energy bills and the cost of living crisis. Members of Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil were among those marching in central London today. Campaign group Enough is Enough, set up in response to the rising cost of living, held events in cities across the UK. It comes on the day energy price rises came into effect for millions of people. Russian troops have pulled out from the eastern city of Lyman in Ukraine after being encircled by Ukrainian forces. A video posted online by the Ukrainian president's chief of staff shows soldiers climbing onto a vehicle and waving the national flag on the outskirts of town. A close ally to Putin has reportedly said Moscow should consider using a low-yield nuclear weapon in response. It comes as Russia has vetoed a United Nations resolution condemning Moscow's illegal annexation of 4 areas of Ukraine. Prime Minister Liz Truss has met her Danish counterpart today to discuss what they say is a so-called sabotage to the Nord Stream gas pipelines. The Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen says she passed key information on the damaged Nord Stream pipelines to Ms Truss at a meeting in Downing Street this morning. A Number 10 spokesman says the leaders stressed the need to stay united in the face of Russia's despicable action in Ukraine. The Danish Prime Minister says both countries will offer their support for the ongoing investigation.
We are very worried about the situation with Nord Stream 1 and 2. This is sabotage and it is critical infrastructure. So, of course, this is a very serious situation. We don't know yet who is behind this. We just decided yesterday to have a very strong cooperation between Germany and Sweden and Denmark when it comes to investigate what has actually happened.
Police say they've not yet found human remains as they search for Moors murders victim Keith Bennett continues. The 12-year-old was one of 5 victims of Ian Brady and Myra Hindley, with 3 of them later found buried on Saddleworth Moor. They were discovered in the Peak District by an author researching the 12-year-old's murder. Brady and Hindley murdered 5 children in the 1960s, with 3 of the victims found. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Neil Oliver Live.
Thank you, Tatiana. OK, so we always start the show with Neil's monologue, and there is absolutely no reason tonight should be any different. Is Neil there? Yes, he is. Neil, please take it away.
Thanks, Emily. I want to tell you a story about money. To be more specific, I want to tell you where money comes from. The truth of which most people are unaware is that money is created out of thin air. Furthermore, every single pound, dollar, euro, yen, and all the rest is created out of thin air by unelected, unaccountable bankers who meet in total secrecy and profit always from their actions. Let's imagine you want to borrow £200,000 to buy a house. When you go to the bank and ask for that money, the banker doesn't give you existing funds, cash from a drawer, for instance. Instead, he creates that £200,000 out of nowhere, money that previously didn't exist. That money's not backed by anything real, no gold or anything else. It's conjured out of nowhere and exists now only because the banker says it does. He then says you have to pay him back the £200,000 plus, let's say for the sake of argument, another £200,000 in interest. He's allowed to credit your account with money that did not exist until you asked for it, and he pressed digits on a keyboard, and then he charges interest on that previously non-existent sum. Talk about a foolproof way to make money. This is how all money is created in our world, and this is why so many people are made to live crippled by debt. Every year, the British people pay tens of billions of pounds to private bankers as interest on something that did not exist in the first place. How can I be sure? But I suspect that if you or I were to attempt something similar, we'd be thrown in jail before our feet touched the ground. William Patterson, co-founder of the Bank of England in 1694, noted that, quote, "The bank hath benefit of interest on all monies which it creates out of nothing." 1694, that's at least as long as this has been going on. How long we've been submitting to debt created by a handful of rich people to keep everyone else under their control. The Bank of England is technically owned by the British government and so notionally by the British people. The fact of the matter, however, is that the government does not tell the bank what to do. Like all central banks, the Bank of England is seemingly answerable to an entity called the Bank for International Settlements. The BIS is run by more unelected, unaccountable, secretive people over which we, the British, like all people in the world, have no say and no control. Most people have never even heard of the Bank for International Settlements, but it's housed in a great glass tower in Basel in Switzerland. It is the BIS that oversees the making and flow of well over 95% of the world's money supply, via, to name but a few, the Bank of England, the US Federal Reserve, the People's Bank of China, the Central Bank of the Russian Federation, and the European Central Bank. It also influences a host of other smaller central banks, including in unstable and failed states like Afghanistan and Libya. We need an honest and open conversation about banks, all banks, and about another way of doing things, a way of potentially freeing the people of the world from the yoke of debt placed across their shoulders by secretive, unaccountable, profiteering private bankers. It may or may not offer the solution to our woes, but I believe it's time now to talk about it, and more importantly, to invite more people to understand what banks actually do and how they do it. If you don't trust me, how about Thomas Jefferson, founding father and third president of the United States, who said, "I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow banks to control the issue of their currency, they will deprive people of all property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. The issuing power should be taken from the banks and restored to the people to whom it properly belongs." The Federal Reserve in the US was created at Christmas time 1913, when most members were away for the holidays. By means of the Federal Reserve Act, all control over money creation was removed from Congress and given to the Federal Reserve Corporation, a private company controlled by bankers. All this despite Article 1 of the US Constitution, which declares, "Congress shall have the power to coin money and regulate the value thereof." Federal was added to the name to trick the people into thinking they, via Congress, were in control. Not anymore, not since that Christmas of 1913. The Fed is a private corporation. Or what about the words of Henry Ford, who transformed the car industry, who said, "It is well enough that the people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system, for if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." The private bankers would have us believe their way of doing business, of making money, is the only way. So, here, let me tell you an astonishing bit of forgotten history. So forgotten, you'd be forgiven for thinking some people don't want us to remember. Back in August 1914, with the First World War looming, people feared the future. More and more were converting their banknotes, bits of paper, into gold sovereigns and half-sovereigns, as was their right in those days when Britain was on the so-called gold standard. But by 1914, the Bank of England had already been involved in dodgy dealings, creating money out of nothing. And there were far more banknotes in circulation than there was gold in the vaults to honour them. If everyone tried to get their gold out at once, such a run on the bank would have been catastrophic. At a stroke, Britain would have lost its ability to pay for the upcoming war. The bankers ran for help to the government and to the Chancellor, David Lloyd George. The August bank holiday was extended by 3 days. An act was rushed through Parliament, and when the banks reopened, people were offered a new kind of treasury note, issued not by the bank, but by HM Treasury, in lieu of their gold. Since the first batches bore the signature of Sir John Bradbury, the then permanent secretary to the Treasury, the public nicknamed them Bradbury Pounds. Because each was backed by the wealth of the nation, the familiar strapline about a promise to pay the bearer on demand was unnecessary and therefore absent entirely. The people accepted the Bradbury Pounds, trusted them on sight as cash they could see and hold and spend as they liked with perfect confidence, and the banks were saved from certain collapse. It was sovereign money, underwritten by the wealth of the nation, and perhaps most valuable of all, by the creativity and potential of the people of that nation. Unlike the money created out of nowhere by private bankers, it was interest-free and unburdened by debt. Britons were briefly beyond the clutches of private bankers, but their reprieve didn't last long. Having been spared the consequences of creating money out of nothing, those bankers were soon back at the Treasury door, demanding the state stop issuing debt-free money. The war was up and running, and as is true of all wars, there was a killing to be made, in among all the killing. The war must be run, those bankers said, only on money borrowed from them and repayable with interest, 3.5% interest as it happened. By the end of the First World War, Britain's national debt had ballooned from £600 million in 1914 to £7 billion. In 1914, remember, a pound was worth £122 in today's money. That's inflation for you. This is no longer the world of 1914. Any solution for 2022 must be made by us, for us, in the world of today. Henry Kissinger said, "Who controls the food supply controls the people. Who controls the energy can control whole continents. Who controls money can control the world." Right now, all around us, the people are being nudged ever closer to digital enslavement by secretive, unaccountable bankers. Right now, control of energy by others we do not know is marching us towards the coldest, hungriest winter many can remember. Right now is the time to take back control of money, its creation, its value, and its flow. By so doing, we can begin the task of regaining control of our world.
Well, thanks very much indeed, Neil. So what do you at home make of all that? Please do let us know, and we have plenty of topics to discuss tonight. So please do keep your tweets and emails coming in throughout. Neil does really have a way of looking at current affairs and looking at the forces behind them, the historical parallels. Very, very interesting indeed. You can email gbviews@gbnews.uk. Of course, you can tweet us as well at gbnews. I'll try to get to some of your comments later in the show, of course. But now let's get down to business. I'm delighted to be joined tonight by financial expert Jasmine Birtles, our very own GB News business and economics editor Liam Halligan, Molly Kingsley, the writer and co-founder of parents campaign group Us For Them, and the one and only Neil Oliver, of course, joining us from Scotland. So what do we make of Neil's monologue, Jasmine?
I thought it was excellent, and it's about time that we really did look at money. You know, what is it, where does it come from? And in particular, what the bankers are doing, because I've been saying for a while that the problems that we're dealing with at the moment are very much to be put at the door of bankers and the whole banking system, particularly since 2009, when we started printing insane amounts of money, and then even more insane amounts in 2020, 2021, and into 22. So it's really important that we ask ourselves, what is money? Where does it come from? Who's producing it? And what are we going to do about this broken banking system that we currently have, which is sucking the lifeblood out of the economy?
Liam, we've seen, of course, the market reaction to the mini budget. Was that just the catalyst? Were there all these underlying issues, the quantitative easing, the interest rates being low for so long?
I think that's exactly right. I don't think the mini budget was the underlying cause of the pound falling. Indeed, the pound's back now against the dollar where it was before Kwasi Kwarteng's statement last Friday. I don't think the mini budget was the reason bond markets spasmed with those market borrowing costs going up, those extra borrowing costs rippling across the economy to mortgages and personal loans, you know, really putting the frighteners on everyone. It was the spark, I think, Emily, as you say, because it was a mini budget that became very, very politicised. I think the government was tin-eared. It was ill-timed to remove the cap on bankers' bonuses and give a tax break to the top 1.5% of the income pile at a time like this, when, as Neil rightly said, we're facing a very tough winter across many millions of households. The reason the bonds market spasmed and the reason interest rates are going to go up a lot in the coming months and years, I'm afraid, is because we're weaning ourselves, as Jasmine said, off the emergency measures, the ultra-low interest rates, the massive amounts of quantitative easing. You know, we have to call it quantitative easing. It's money creation above and beyond what is justifiable to keep the economy going. Those emergency measures after 2009-10, they became a lifestyle choice because they made lots of already wealthy people even wealthier, blowing huge bubbles across asset prices, bonds, stocks, properties, why your kids can't buy a house. And it also, that quantitative easing and ultra-low rates meant governments could borrow very, very cheaply. That's why these excessive measures have hung around for so long.
Yeah.
Now the bubbles have got so big, interest rates are deeply in negative territory when accounting for inflation. That COVID-era QE, that's been injected directly into the economy. That's why a big reason inflation is so high. And we now need to adjust away from that and wean ourselves off those emergency measures.
Liam,
that's what we're seeing now. We're seeing the beginning of
Liam,
that. It's nothing to do with this mini budget.
Neil, you like to look
Liam,
at the big picture when it comes to moments like this. Do you think there's going to be some kind of reset in our standards of living as a result of these changes? You know, we've seen the leap in interest rates that we're probably going to face.
I was wanting to ask Liam, actually. I've said on here before that I think it's time to think the unthinkable. I think the debt that's been created by bankers, quadrillions of debt, will simply never be paid. And I wondered, Liam, are we simply at the end of the line? You know, when I say think the unthinkable, have we reached the end of that model of just printing money whenever it's desired? Is it time to think about something else? You know, I queued up sovereign money, for example.
Well, your excellent monologue, Neil, and you've got a fantastic way with words. I mean, you know I think that, but so many of our viewers and listeners think that too. But what your monologue described at the beginning, it is the rather alarming system that nerdy economists like me called, are you ready for it? Fractional fiduciary reserve banking. What does that mean? It means that for every pound a bank really owns, it can lend out about 10. So the reserve asset ratio is 10%. That's how they create money. They do literally have a license to create money. But you don't, and you need that credit creation rather than exchanging stones or sticks or gold to grow the economy. That is the lubrication that oils the modern economy and has indeed led to huge scientific, commercial progress. And that's how our living standards have improved. But when the banking system over-exit, when those reserve asset ratios are loosened by politicians who then get nice, cushy jobs in banks that they don't understand when they retire, when the banking system itself, and in particular the central banks, get politically captured and the politicians always looking at the short term, egg those central banks on to create even more money from the centre, then the whole system, the fiduciary aspect of it, the trust system, that this little bit of paper really means something just because it's got the Queen or now the King's head on, that trust is broken. That's when you get inflation, and that's what we're seeing now.
And also,
I mean, Molly, very quickly, and then we'll go to Molly.
Well, I was just saying, I think, Neil, that you're right, that we are coming to the end of it, and I think bankers around the world and governments around the world have realised this. What worries me is that the answer that they seem to have come up with is central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, and this, I think, is the worst of all possible worlds. And you know, this is something that I'm personally fighting against, and I'm actually going back to cash. I'm fighting for cash in order to keep this. I would prefer that we went to something like a gold standard, you know, something solid, not necessarily a gold standard, but something like that, but definitely not to go into central bank digital currencies. Those are, as far as I'm concerned, the end of everything, the end of freedom, the end of democracy.
And Molly, it seems we have been, it's true, it seems we have been lied to by, well, the government, political elite, that we can continue to just borrow our way out of any crisis, any external shock, and that we'll all be fine. Are we now learning that we can't do that?
Well, I mean, it's easy to lie, isn't it? Because what really is happening here, and has been, you know, so pronounced, especially in the last 2 years, is we're mortgaging the futures of the younger generation. So, of course, we can borrow a blank cheque knowing full well that we're not going to be around when the cheque has to be paid back. But actually, if you look at the sums that have been borrowed in the last few years alone, I mean, are we on about 167 billion just for the lockdown year? You've then got 150 billion, is that right, Liam? I think for the, the energy price caps. You've got a 45 billion pound.
Could be more, could be less.
Who knows? These are staggering sums, and they are going to be casting a shadow over the rest of our children and their grandchildren's lives. But the truth is, the people making those decisions will not be around to have to witness the car crash that they are potentially causing.
Yes, and this is something that we'll come back to, because Liz Truss, I mean, I know what she's trying to do. She's trying to grow the economy, which is brilliant. And to do that, you do need a lower tax burden. You do need lower regulation. But she seemed to promise us that we could continue borrowing to pay for it. And now she's having to say, well, actually, we may need to cut public spending, which no one should be surprised about. But she hadn't articulated to the public and to the Conservative Party membership, at least, before they put their cross in her box. Anyway, after the break, the cost of living crisis affects everyone, of course, but are the younger generation, as Molly was just mentioning, hit hardest of all? We'll also be assessing the government's energy bill relief scheme. We'll see you back in 2 minutes.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Welcome back to Neil Oliver Live with me, Emily Carver, and Neil joining us tonight from his home in Scotland. We've been discussing the economic crisis tonight, but maybe one group who we don't focus on as much as we should are the younger generation, who had their lives curtailed by lockdown and now find themselves growing up in a world where budgets are tight for everyone, but also, of course, for them. Molly, I'm sure you'll have a lot to say on this.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said earlier, we've just come out of a period where really what we saw was intergenerational theft. I don't think that's too strong a way of putting it, where the young were burdened for 2 years to, protect their elders. And whatever you think of that, the thought that you're then going to now layer on top of that a cost of living crisis. And of course, we know, as you say, the young are disproportionately impacted by that for two reasons, really. One, they tend to have less savings, and two, because they're the beginning of their careers, they tend to have less well-paid jobs. So they are looking at this double whammy, really, of pain. And it's not just money, it's about life opportunities and life experiences. So, when you don't have money, you don't have anywhere to live, you can't socialise, you can't make friends. And obviously we've seen, in particular for students have just come out of 2 years of having this really radically curtailed life. children, for different reasons, obviously not directly impacted by cost of living, but of course their families and their parents will be. And children and their education have been, chronically underinvested for decades, really, but particularly these last 2 years. And of course, money that might otherwise have been available to help children recover and to help them flourish, to help even our youngest children, with early language intervention and essential things like this in light of the pandemic, that money is now not there, and it has now been pulled to other areas. And once again, it is the children and the young people who are the perennial losers.
Now, Jasmine, I'm sure there are some people at home who are sick of the sort of intergenerational warfare, you might say, pitting the elderly against the youth, who's worse off when it comes to money and expenditure and whatnot. Jasmine, do you think it's fair to say that the children have been worst affected by the last few years?
I do, actually, yes. And interestingly, I have written about this, sort of the whinging between the young and those who are retired. There's obviously there are arguments on both sides, but putting it all together, yes, I would say that the young particularly, especially now, as Molly said, after the lockdowns and the wickedness, frankly, that was imposed on many young people, children particularly. Yes, I think they have absolutely...
But it was wicked, was it not, to the elderly people who were left in their homes, couldn't be visited by their family, and I'm not sure it was worse for any one group or another, really.
Agreed. No, I think when it comes to just general life, absolutely. I mean,
and of course they weren't at risk of death.
No, absolutely, very true. No, I'm thinking particularly economically. Really, that's where I was. But oh gosh, yes, care homes.
Gosh, it's hard to think about that now. Yeah. Now we've got our freedoms back for the most part. Liam, in terms of the economics, in terms of money in your pocket, we've seen that the government wants to keep the pension triple lock, for example, but then for working people, or not working people in this case, benefits may well not go up with inflation. So is it a bit unfair?
Well, there is still a lot of pensioner poverty in the UK. Our basic state pension is still very low by international standards of other advanced countries. And so I wouldn't want to do old people down. Of course, they deserve help. We have many vulnerable old people, and we know that many old people will suffer as the nights draw in and the temperatures drop, particularly when, even despite this energy price cap that is being introduced literally as we speak, fuel prices, gas and electricity will still be very, very costly. But I do think this is a particularly tough time for young people. Molly Kingsley and her colleagues at Us For Them deserve huge praise for highlighting again and again the plight of young people during lockdown. During lockdown, those of us who were talking about the collateral damage, those of us who urged our viewers, listeners, readers to consider things like the Great Barrington Declaration, selective shielding of people were pilloried as being completely beyond the pale, and the evidence is now that we were largely right. I've taken a huge interest during my journalistic life in housing because my family's life chances, my father was an immigrant from Ireland, were revolutionised because he, a working class man with his working class wife, could buy a home. That absolutely changed their view of the world, their view of their place in the world. And yet today's young people, even at the ultra-low interest rates we've had, Emily, for the last 10 years, as we were saying before the break, today's young people, whether they're renting or trying to buy, are paying more for their housing costs and are less likely to own their own home, these are 25 to 34-year-olds, than any equivalent cohort since the 1930s.
And again, we can put
and that's absolutely outrageous.
Yeah, and like you were saying, Liam, we can put this again to money printing that has been going on for so long, the just excessive amounts of money that bankers have been able to lend out and put in their own pockets as well. And that has, hugely...
And central bankers have created. That's when it really got out of control. Quantitative easing, it was meant to be an emergency measure. The UK's quantitative easing programme began in March 2009 as a sixth-month, £50 billion programme to inject liquidity into bombed-out banks who'd taken massive
Liam,
bets.
there are still
massive bets in order to prevent the banking system collapsing and civic unrest if people couldn't get their money out of banks.
And it's
it
continued,
went on
and it's continued,
and on from 50 billion. It's now at 895 billion. 13 years later,
and
counting.
There are still economists who will deny that it's had any impact
Most
on
economists
inflation
deny that it's had
at
impact.
all. Neil,
The entire economic establishment denies
let's
it.
go to Neil Neil in Scotland. We've got to bring you in on your own show. It is your own show.
I'm quite happy.
It is your own show. I mean, this is something that you and many presenters here on GB News were talking about when everyone else was silent. The impact of the lockdowns and so on education. Is it that gets you most frustrated, enraged, whatever adjective you want to use?
I would say without a doubt that the cohort or the part of the population that's been most affected in negative ways, it's young people. It's teenagers and down who've been hit in every conceivable way. I mean, they weren't at risk from the virus. But the impact on education, on the freedom to socialise, on the landmarks, that should normally punctuate the year, all of that curtailed, loss of access to extended family was shameful and catastrophic. And absolutely hats off to Molly and her team for continuously keeping that attention there. Big Issue magazine have reported recently that children as young as 14 are pitching in, earning, to help, to help the family income. The Royal London Insurance has said that children as young as 10 are saying that one of the top 5 challenges they'll face in the coming year